Woken up from his reverie inside the warm and dry cabin, Keshav had stepped out and was immediately accosted by the wind, and luckily for him, he also ran into a crowd returning from the local toddy shop. As was typical of the bonhomie that appeared after imbibing a couple of glasses of the smooth stuff, they decided that this alien-looking fellow needed to be helped. Thereby, Keshav was gently pushed along to the local eating place, which would eventually feature in more ways than he would have ever imagined in his future life amongst the inhabitants of the pass. Keshav's journey had begun 8 months earlier in the foothills of a much more mightier but younger range of mountains up in the north. Life in the barren terrain of his home was simple, consisting of growing a few hardy vegetables and tending to a flock of goats and hill cattle which yielded very little milk. Just like the downpour in which Keshav had landed in the town, in the pass down south, a similar rain had started in his village, which was situated at the end of a long and narrow gorge. The downpour had started on a warm, sultry evening and continued relentlessly for 4 days, with the water level rising ominously with each passing hour in the narrow rivulet that ran through the gorge. Steep rocky ledges that formed the sides of the gorge prevented any runoff of water. The result was the whole volume of water flowed by the side of Keshav's village, which was situated in a relatively flat bit of ground. Keshav's family had watched the rising level of water with trepidation, and when it reached a certain level, they released the goats and cattle as the chance of entrapment became imminent. The family, with their precious possessions in several bundles, climbed the rocky ledge to try to wait out the crisis. The rains did not slacken, resulting in the top of the gorge giving away and a massive wall of water swept away everything in its path. All the goats had climbed the ledge with effortless dexterity, but the cattle were swept away in front of the eyes of Keshav's mother. She wailed loudly as the animals, which she considered her children, disappeared down the gorge. At long last, the rain stopped, and the whole family stepped gingerly off the ledge and walked beside the roaring river towards the village, which by now was engulfed by a solid sheet of water. Keshav's father surveyed the scene and grimly as his whole crop of carrots and potatoes had been swept away. The less fortunate who had not climbed onto a higher surface in time had also been carried away. Help came the next day in the form of helicopters dropping packets of food on which Keshav's family subsisted. But the devastation was complete, and the whole way of life that the simple, hardy villagers had led was wiped out in a flash. After a month, it became apparent to Keshav that he would have to leave his home to find subsistence for him and his family, as there was nothing left in the village from which a life could be wrought out of. Also, the aid givers had concentrated more on immediate relief rather than the equally important long-term rehabilitation. Thus, he left for the capital, which was where anybody who left anywhere headed to. He was one of the thousands who thronged the city to look for work and thereby money which he could send to his people back home.
One is non-fiction in your case, and in Mr. Maniambat's case, it is property fiction, I'm presuming. So we have literally a kind of spectrum here. I would like each one of you to tell us how the work that you do in your other life, and I think Mr. Satye's case, that's really quite clear, but how is there a synergy between what you do in the other life and your writing life?
Well, actually, Jerry, this book fell on my lap by mistake, I should say, because what happened is, like I said, we ran a homestay, and some people came to visit us.
Okay, just one question. What is a cancer surgeon doing running a homestay?
So a cancer surgeon is footing the bill for the wife to run the homestay. So when these visitors came, they heard the story of how this home was built and what all we went through. They said, you should write a book about this. And of course, this conversation was directed to the wife, who happens to be a journalist. So she said, okay, I'll do it. 1 month went by, 2 months went by, nothing happened. So I asked her twice, I asked her thrice. So she snapped at me. She said, what? Do you think this writing a book is like surgery where you just chop up people and stitch them up? So I said, okay, let me try it. That's how it went about. I chopped it up and I wrote it.
And how long did the surgery take from start to finish?
The surgery took 2 months. I used to operate on real patients from morning 8 to 2, come home, have lunch. 4 o'clock my consulting room started, so 2 to 4 I used to write it. Once I finished writing the book, she said, you got to rewrite it and rewrite it. You don't, give it in once. So I said, in surgery, we cut once, we stitch once. That's it. So I didn't rewrite it.
Okay, Jerry, you've already told everybody why, that everything is to do with flying. But as helicopter pilots, we get exposed to various aspects of life other than flying. And because we go to places where normal people just can't go, and we meet with so many different canvas of people, that becomes an experience in itself. Now, I took to writing in 2014, 10 years after the tsunami. I was in the tsunami. Then I was with the Naxals, fighting the Naxals, and we were in Sri Lanka. So I had seen a whole lot of things in my flying career, which I thought I could pen down. And when I went and saw the tsunami and the aftermath, and I wrote my diary then, there were friends, in fact they are present here, who have really pushed me to write my story about the tsunami. That was my first book. It was a very simple way of writing it, just some photographs and something to what I did there and what my experiences were about the tsunami. This is the book that I wrote, A Few Good Men and the Angry Sea. After which I got a little more confident, and I decided to write about this friend of mine, MP Kumar. I owe it to him. I thought that we were together in the academy, and I think he requires more exposure to more number of people. I think he's an inspiration, and people should learn from his life. So I took it upon myself that I must write about him, and write I did. I used to sit very late into the night after all my other work was over, and whatever time I could find, sometimes I wrote through the night till 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, and went for work. Thankfully, I was not flying at that point in time, so otherwise I would have been in trouble. Other than that, the other book that I wrote, of course, just released last week, is Up in the Sky, again related to flying and flying stories. It's about what it means to be a pilot, one, of a helicopter, and what a normal life of a pilot is. So there are 19 short stories woven into a book. So this is how I went about my writing, Jerry.
Does the armed forces have any policy about what you can say, what you can't say? Do you have to show it to somebody and ask for permission or anything like that? Or?
Yes, of course. Everything that I write on my name, in my name, it has to go through the intelligence. The INT checks it out. They see whether I'm not disclosing any state secrets, and thereafter it is cleared at air headquarters. And after they clear me, only then the script is released to the publishers for printing.
Suppose they had some objections to what you'd written, would you be allowed to talk about those objections, or is that also a state secret?
I don't write anything which is objectionable in any case.
But just in case...
I'm very proud of my service. I'm what I am because of the Indian Air Force and the Armed Forces. And I don't think I'll ever be able to even write one negative word about it.
That is nice. Wonderful to know. Mr. Maniam.
I am actually an anesthetist and an intensive care specialist. And I think you people don't know what an anesthetist's life is. They go into the theater at 7 a.m., hardly talk to any of the patients, come out at 10 p.m. So it's a life which is very insular. You don't meet anyone, you don't talk to anybody, and full of tension. Every minute is a tension. And funnily, as you grow older and more senior, they make you do the more complex cases. So, it's very strange. And then you spend a lot of, maybe every third night I haven't slept for last 30 years. So it's a different life. A couple of years ago, I was in KMCH here, the biggest hospital. I decided maybe this way I'll just drop dead, because two of my colleagues had massive heart attacks and died. Highest amount of suicide amongst doctors is in anesthetists. So.
And you're laughing.
So I left and I went back to what I used to do in England for a couple of years, which is pain management, chronic pain and cancer pain and palliation. So it's a little less than being called out of your house at 2 a.m. because there is a fetal distress, and you drive like, before the baby becomes blue, you try to reach there. So then I went into this, and then I had a clinic in Kerala. I had, I used to give a lot of talks. It is in this process when I traveled that I met people, most of which have been adapted to this story, that I used to travel through a pass regularly to Kerala. And I used to meet a lot of people. So that's how this book came up.
I hate to ask this, but pain relief and pain management is easier than being in anesthetic?
You don't get called out at 4 a.m.
Oh, okay.
It's as simple as that.
Okay.
Maybe as complex, but after a certain time, earlier it's fine. You get called out, you are fine. You come back, you play a football match, nothing happens. Slowly the recovery times becomes more. And you feel tired longer, irritable, so that's why I slowly.
So how did you find the time to write the book?
No, I'll make notes everywhere. I carry a book, and whenever I see an idea, I note down. Like for instance, I'll tell you the main where it came up. The story was I used to have a coffee with my driver in the pass. All passes have food joints before or after. It's usually, okay, let's have something and let's climb. Or it's, oh, we've finished the climb, let's have something to celebrate. So I used to go to a place, and I was fluent in, having done all my schooling in Delhi, I was fluent in Hindi. And there were a lot of these itinerant workers working in these eateries. So and they knew me because the label is there in the car, the German doctor. So when I went there, the owner, there was a group of people, suddenly told me about a fellow there. He said, Doctor, even oru pani udukilla, means that he doesn't work at all. Now, that fellow immediately said, Saab, ye hame jhaadta rehta hai. Pura din jhaadta rehta hai. Meaning that you keep firing them. Then there was a lady, which I knew it is this North Indian fellow's wife, who surprisingly said, Haan saab, ye sota rehta hai. That is very, very unusual for a frontier lady. They will support their husbands for long. So, because I live with one from Gurdaspur. But their support is, it's real support. So, and I found it very funny that this lady is not taking the side of the husband. And I used to mix with them, and they used to, find a lot of joy in talking to someone who knew Hindi, because everyone was talking Tamil or Malayalam. And I used to meet them, and slowly I used to go every week to that hospital. They disappeared one by one. And I used to wonder what happened. And that's how this story came.
Now we are open to questions, so if there's anyone in the audience who has something to ask any of our panelists, please feel free, put your hands up.
So I'd like to direct my question to the anesthetist, also to mention that your your book really captured, there's a great sense of prescience there because, you've described this flood situation that the migrant workers fled from in the north and then coming to the south. And now you're seeing that in Kerala. Yes, so it's almost like, how do you react as a writer and you almost see, the scenario coming to life?
The second one is maybe prophetic. I might have packed and walked more of Ooty than more people here. So camps in Kerala in the last 10 days to help out as a club.
While it is a given that you're an acknowledged oncologist and surgeon, I just wanted to know, I know you've been dabbling with a couple of other things besides writing, like organic farming. So what is the gratification and how is it different from being a successful surgeon in doing these other vocations, like launching a book or growing an organic cauliflower?
Came about thanks to Earth Trust in Nimi, because when we came to the Nilgiris and built this house, we didn't know much about farming. The only thing we knew about was when we were in school, I studied in Lawrence School, Lovedale. When it rained, we used to curse the rain because we couldn't play cricket. But when you came here, you realized the rain is so important for farmers. So we converted part of our land into a vegetable garden. Initially, it was a regular vegetable garden, but then we made it organic. And we realized organic farming is quite expensive because first 2 years you don't make money, you lose money. But when the vegetable comes out, it's really refreshing because you put it in the ground, you see it growing. It's something fantastic. And in fact, when we get visitors to our homestay, we take the kids to the farm, to the vegetable garden. Many of these are people from the city. They pick up the vegetables. They see them on their plate in the night for dinner. And this is something you never see in a city. So coming to a smaller town or coming to the Nilgiris, you learn a lot about this. The other question is about my book. Now I'm in a completely different arena because here are all literally experts and I'm a non-literary person because I've written only scientific articles. So this is a completely different field for me.
Please. Normally soldiers are trained to be, if not emotionless, but at least in very full control of your emotions. So how difficult was it to write a book such as this with an obviously emotional story, connection to a good friend of yours? How difficult was it to balance your training versus the content that you were dealing with?
All of us are the same stock, the same human beings. But only thing we are trained to our limits of tolerance a little higher maybe. But let me tell you one thing, I was in Bombay, I'm part of the paraplegic, there's a Nina Foundation in Bombay, and I never thought that there would be people outside the armed forces arena who are living as productive lives as they do in the soldiers who have been injured, spinal injury patients. I saw it in Bombay and I realized that, well, there was a girl who was playing international basketball in a wheelchair. There was a guy who had gone across the English Channel without legs. So there were a whole lot of people I met there, and then I realized that I was saying that I am very mentally strong. Then I realized that anybody who goes through this kind of a thing becomes mentally strong in any case. As far as your question is concerned about writing the book and emotions, yes. When I was reading this book out, and this book has been translated now into 7 languages and 8 languages Braille now. So whenever I've been reading this book out to the translators and when they have been reading out their versions to me, I have always cried. So it's not that, I've got so involved with this book that every time I read it again and again, it brings tears to my eyes, and also it takes me back into my times when we were training and what we did and how it has helped me in my life.
A question for Dr. Srinivasan, actually. It's interesting to have this marvelous panel, but 2 of the speakers have drawn on their professional experiences to do their writing. And I'm intrigued that you have indicated throughout your remarks that your writing is about other parts of your life, not your professional work as an oncologist. So I was just wondering if, because you several times said that that the only writing you do in that role is scientific articles. Have you ever drawn on your life as a surgeon for material that might be non-fiction or fiction?
Yes, sorry. So, in fact, in this book, there are a lot of small italic versions. Somebody did mention about italics, which I put medical stuff in. For example, there's something about ethical medicine, and I brought up the college where I studied, Christian Medical College, Vellore, where the medicine taught is ethical medicine. And I put it up over here that there are some hospitals in Bombay which pay doctors for sending patients there. And that is known as a kickback, which in medicine should not be there. So that is there. The other thing I did mention in this book